Trade rumors continue to escalate for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and this is wild, as a recent article has proposed a blockbuster trade between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Las Vegas Golden Knights that could make sense for both sides. You're going to write down that exact article and discuss what the trade is on this episode. But before we do, make sure to hit the subscribe button. It would mean the world if you do that for Darius and myself, as we're on the road now to 12,000 subscribers, and about 70% of you aren't subscribed. But Darius, we're going to take a step into a wild trade that was proposed and is gaining some traction around Leafs Nation. A lot of fans are a little bit interested in this deal, and this is actually a big blockbuster trade. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying it's not a concrete report saying the Leafs are currently entertaining this, but it's a very interesting point of discussion. You can see this here. Maple Leafs trade pitch lands them $95 million for player haul. Now, you're going to see that, and you're going to about to see the trade, and you might be very surprised. I want you to leave in the comments what you think about this trade, but we're going to dissect it here. And Nick Robertson, Timothy Liljegren, and Mitch Marner for William Karlsson, Ivan Barbashev, Zach Whitecloud, and Nicholas Hage. Now, before we continue this video, we have a quick message from our sponsor, NordVPN.
And we know that in years past, the Leafs defense has not been up to snuff. But with NordVPN, your internet's defense is guaranteed. Visit nordvpn.com/Leafs to access internet privacy with a single click, even when you're not at home. Using public Wi-Fi networks at shopping malls or airports can be risky, but with NordVPN, your personal data is encrypted, providing a super simple, super easy protection. And I know personally, sometimes I want to watch TV shows or movies that are not available in my country, but with NordVPN, you can spoof your location and enjoy content from different countries easily. With NordVPN's special Threat Protection Pro and Dark Web Monitor, you get an extra layer of protection just for good measure from unwanted malware on your device, and will be notified if your sensitive personal information ends up on the dark web. Get an exclusive NordVPN deal plus 4 extra months by using the code at nordvpn.com/Leafs. It's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guaranteed. Special thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring today's video.
This is a crazy trade that the likelihood of it actually happening isn't super high, but if you're Brad Treliving, you kind of knock down 2 birds with 1 stone in the sense of a Mitch Marner trade and Nick Robertson, who did request to be traded. And you kind of get, I'm not going to say get out of that Liljegren contract, they literally just signed it, but you're getting back a lot of players that maybe would help in your win now mode that the Leafs are in.
Yeah, if you look at the trade broken down for both teams, I mean, this makes a lot of sense for the Toronto Maple Leafs because of some of the players that clearly have said that they don't want to be here, right? And when you look at Timothy Liljegren too, like you said, they just signed that contract extension, but at the end of the day, it's an odd contract extension, and I'm not sure another team would have gave that player that much money. But anyway, when you break it down, I mean, you get the third pairing of the Vegas Golden Knights in Whitecloud and Hague that won the Stanley Cup just a few years ago, and obviously you get a right shot defenseman in Whitecloud who's been pretty good despite some injury trouble for the Vegas Golden Knights. So that'd be great for the Toronto Maple Leafs because you kind of feel, Liljegren out, Whitecloud in. That'd be great, right? Hague, I thought that they should have selected Hague in the same draft that they got Liljegren in. So that would be a very welcome addition. And then the salary kind of works out too with the other 2 players. Barbashev was great for the Vegas Golden Knights in the playoffs, playoff performer, would fix your left wing problem, quote unquote problem that the Leafs have right now, where they could have they could really use a bona fide left wing there in the top 6. And obviously William Karlsson, I mean, he's taken a step back in the last couple of years, but he's still a very good goal scorer and great for the Vegas Golden Knights. So that'd be very interesting. You'd fill out your lineup more, certainly, with this trade, right? And you're trading off assets that, don't necessarily want to be here. So in theory, the trade could work because the salary would work out the same too, but lots of moving pieces. I'm not sure this gets done. And in theory, it's a great idea, but I don't know if the Vegas Golden Knights want to give up big pieces of their forward core like that. And obviously, and their defensive core for that matter too, because it is getting older.
Yeah, they would be cutting down on some of their big contracts at least, but yeah, trades of this ilk with massive moves massive players, going both ways don't happen too often. Obviously, Marner and Robertson are the headliners of the deal. Nicholas Hage is interesting. William Karlsson, he's under control for another 8 years. Well, he's in the middle of an 8-year, $47 million contract, and a lot of money going into this trade, going both ways really, because Mitch Marner would be due for a contract. He would also have to waive his no move clause. Nick Robertson's also due for a contract soon. He would have to extend with the Las Vegas Golden Knights. And I'm not exactly sure if the Golden Knights would consider this trade, because you're really getting a question mark a little bit in Nick Robertson. Timothy Liljegren is on a weird deal, but then you're obviously getting the superstar Mitch Marner. And yeah, and basically what this article says about it is that they could still trade Timothy Liljegren. And basically, you can see this here. And Darius, I wanted to mention this because this is also like a sub point of this trade. Obviously, this trade is a very interesting one, and we'll get back into it in a second. But the Timothy Liljegren thing is interesting. You see, Toronto signed Liljegren to a contract extension on June 30th. That, however, doesn't mean the Leafs won't move him during the offseason if an opportunity to do so emerges. And we know at the start of the month, Chris Johnson basically came out and said they're still looking to potentially trade Timothy Liljegren, and it's easier to trade him when he was extended to this deal. Even if it isn't the most team-friendly deal, it's still a more movable contract than him heading into arbitration. So what are your thoughts on that part of this deal? Obviously, it's funny we're talking about the smallest part in theory, but I think it actually plays the most into a likely scenario for the Toronto Maple Leafs is the Timothy Liljegren aspect of this trade.
Yeah, I think so. And like the other two aspects of the trade too, were are players that, they haven't really shown that they want to be here, right? Maybe Mitch Marner said he wants to play in Toronto, but hasn't signed a contract extension yet. And Nick Robertson's camp has come out and said, we don't want to be here either, right? And like you mentioned with the Timothy Liljegren thing, right? He might end up being a better fit on a different team, right? And that contract extension is just odd. It was really odd to me. I think it's too much money for what he does on the Leafs, but he could be good somewhere else. And I think it makes him more attractive, at least, maybe not the number of the contract, but being signed to a contract instead of, trading his rights, and you would have to go to arbitration with him, and he's an RFA and all that. So I think just getting that deal done, even though it was a little weird to me, makes him a little bit more attractive to other teams. And maybe he could benefit from a change of scenery too. I think there's a couple pieces like these three on the Leafs that could benefit from a change of scenery. And, in turn, there's pieces coming into the Leafs that I think would look great on the Leafs, especially in this trade. But again, not sure if Vegas considers it. Although I do think, Vegas could be a very enticing option for Mitch Marner if he were to waive his no trade clause. One of two teams, I think, but very interesting.
Yeah, and diving into some of the stats of the players beginning back, William Karlsson is a 60-point had a 60-point game or season. Sorry, a 60-point game would be crazy. A 60-point season last year. Sorry, in 70 games, a 30-goal, 30-assist guy. You're adding much needed goal scoring to this team, and we say that even though we have the best goal scorer in the NHL. More so talking about playoffs and just in general there. And then of course you're also getting Ivan Barbashev, who's another interesting guy, and neither of these players are super old. Karlsson, 31 years old, would be around 32 by the time the season starts, and Barbashev being 28, and they're under contract, obviously about to be 29. They're under contract for a few more years, and you compare that to Mitch Marner, who's not under contract. Like, the deal definitely makes sense, especially if they're going all in over the next couple years, because if you add these guys, Barbashev, Karlsson, Whitecloud, Haig, you're putting together an extremely formidable team, a Stanley Cup contender, even though they already are a Stanley Cup contender in theory on paper. But your next season, you'd really be, especially with the additions they made to the blue line here, you're adding more blue line additions in this trade. It makes a lot of sense to me. Again, though, I think if a deal is going to happen like this, I think it would either be for a smaller package with Mitch Marner only, or a smaller package with Robertson, and maybe together with Liljegren could make some sense as well.
Yeah, it'd probably be a smaller package in theory that would probably work out, logically. But like you mentioned too, there's a lot of cost certainty for the Leafs in this deal, right? Because we don't know what Mitch Marner is going to make. We don't know what Nick Robertson's going to make. And we do know what those other pieces coming from Vegas make, right? And it's not as much, and they're still relatively young, like you said, and they're playoff performers. That group of players have won the Stanley Cup, right? And when we talk about depth scoring, I don't necessarily mean, personally, I don't necessarily mean bottom six. I mean like guys who can score other than Austin Matthews up in the lineup in the top six. And if you add those two players, you're adding some more depth scoring in that way, right? You're adding more potential goals. And obviously Austin Matthews scores a lot of them, but it dries up in the playoffs, right? It does for every team. And these are guys who won in the playoffs. So very interesting theory, right? Interesting trade. I think it would look great for the Leafs. But again, if you look at the trade broken down, it does kind of look like in theory, the Leafs trading away spare parts for a lot of really good players from the Vegas Golden Knights. But I'm not saying that Vegas wouldn't benefit from Mitch Marner. I think he's a great player, and Liljegren, I think, would look really good on another team too. So very interesting.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts around this trade, your thoughts on Timothy Liljegren potentially getting moved, and would you do this deal if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs? Because very interesting one. I think the Leafs will come out the winners in this trade. But let us know in the comments down below. Thank you guys for watching.